The ousted Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro and his wife Cilia Flores are set to appear in a federal court here in New York City by midday. U.S. forces took them into custody Saturday, and President Trump insists the U.S. is now in charge of Venezuela. Listen.
Venezuela right now is a dead country. We have to bring it back, and we're going to have big investments by the oil companies to bring back the infrastructure. We're going to just take care of the country. We're going to cherish the country. We're going to take care, more importantly, of the people.
Maduro and his wife are being held right now at a detention center in Brooklyn, New York. They face drug trafficking and weapons charges. Maduro denies those accusations. And we have team coverage for you on this morning. Our Aaron Navarro is at the White House with the president's thinking and his next move. Taurean Small has a reaction from Congress live on Capitol Hill. And Ramy Inocencio is tracking response from around the world. But let's begin in the bottom right corner of your screen with Bradley Blackburn. He's outside of the courthouse here in New York City. Bradley, what can we expect today?
Errol Maduro and his wife will be brought to this courthouse in just a few hours. Right now, they are being held at that detention facility that has also held Luigi Mangione and Ghislaine Maxwell, among others. This really is, Errol, a stunning turn just 2 days after troops swarmed in.
Venezuela's former president Nicolás Maduro is behind bars in this Brooklyn detention center. Soon, he and his wife, Cilia Flores, are expected to make their first appearance in a Manhattan federal court on drug, weapons, and narco-terrorism charges.
There will be more security around him, obviously, but it will be fairly procedural.
On Saturday, the U.S. military carried out the operation that led to their capture in Venezuela's capital city of Caracas, igniting new uncertainty over the country's future.
We're in charge.
The president faced new questions Sunday over who's running Venezuela.
Venezuela right now is a dead country. We have to bring it back, and we're going to have big investments by the oil companies.
Venezuela's new interim president, former Vice President Delcy Rodriguez, issued a statement calling for peaceful coexistence. President Trump says she's cooperating, though in an interview with The Atlantic, he also warned, quote, if she doesn't do what's right, she is going to pay a very big price.
As the Trump administration and Justice Department lawyers prepare for court here today, there's a different reaction on Capitol Hill, where some lawmakers are now slamming the Venezuela operation as illegal.
The Constitution is really pretty clear that the representatives of the people get to be consulted and ultimately approve military activity. That has not happened here.
Multiple sources familiar tell CBS News White House officials are expected to give a classified briefing to lawmakers later this afternoon.
And we've learned dozens of Venezuelan and Cuban nationals were killed during this weekend's operation. Several U.S. service members were also injured, Errol, but President Trump says they're doing okay.
All right, Bradley, with the latest details, thank you. And we are learning more about exactly how this operation unfolded. A source tells CBS News a small team of CIA personnel have been on the ground in Venezuela since August, tracking Maduro's movements. And then on Saturday, the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff told reporters that more than 150 aircraft were involved in the attack on multiple locations, which you see highlighted here, and around the capital city of Caracas. They were launched from 20 different military bases. General Dan Kane also said soldiers arrived at Maduro's compound just after 1 a.m. Eastern time, and by around 3:30 a.m. Eastern, he said the Venezuelan leader and his wife had been captured. CBS News White House reporter Aaron Navarro joins us now with more. Aaron, so much happened over the weekend. A lot of folks waking up to this. The president says the U.S. is now in charge of Venezuela. How exactly, though, if the Maduro regime is still intact?
Yeah, that's right, Errol. The messaging has been a bit mixed from the White House. While President Trump and the White House have said that they will work with Rodriguez, the interim president who was appointed by Maduro, they've also talked broadly about being in charge of, quote, running the country. And President Trump kind of talked a little bit about this last night, where he said essentially that they will run the country through controlling its oil industry. President Trump said he has spoken to multiple American oil companies who will go into Venezuela, revive the infrastructure that has been under state control in Venezuela in the past couple of decades, and use profits of that to pay for kind of rebuilding the oil industry there. On Face the Nation, Secretary of State Marco Rubio was also asked about the president's language about running the country and said that the U.S. will, quote, be running policy. Take a listen to more of him here.
The president always retains optionality on anything and on all of these matters. He certainly has the ability and the right under the Constitution of the United States to act against imminent and urgent threats against the country. What the president has said, obviously, is, and I think what he's pointing to is that this obsession people have about boots and this or that, but he does not feel like he is going to publicly, rule out options that are available for the United States, even though that's not what you're seeing right now. What you're seeing right now is an oil quarantine that allows us to exert tremendous leverage over what happens next.
Now, that oil quarantine is the military and economic strategy to control oil exports coming out of Venezuela by using the presence of naval ships in the region. The thinking there being that the Rodriguez government will comply with what the U.S. wants when it comes to oil, drug trafficking, and migration. But even if that pans out, the long-term plan for the U.S., quote, control of Venezuela is still unclear. Asked if he'll demand free and fair elections in Venezuela, President Trump told reporters last night, quote, "It depends."
And President Trump is now suggesting the U.S. could do more, take military action against other nations. Under what justifications and where exactly?
Yeah, the president was asked if Colombia, which shares a border with Venezuela, could be next in terms of a similar military-style action that we saw from this past weekend. The president criticized the current president of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, for the drug trade and production of cocaine in the country. Take a listen to President Trump talk a little bit more about this last night.
Colombia is very sick, too, run by a sick man who likes making cocaine and selling it to the United States. And he's not going to be doing it very long, let me tell you.
So there will be an operation by the U.S.
It sounds good to me.
Yesterday, Petro responded by calling the threat, quote, illegitimate, defended actions he has taken against drug traffickers in Colombia and called on Latin American countries to unite. We also saw from this past weekend President Trump float action, military action against cartels in Mexico, again using drug trafficking as the reason. And on Cuba, which provides a lot of security to Venezuela in getting oil in exchange for oil, President Trump said, quote, it looks ready to fall due to income that they will lose from oil from Venezuela.
Fascinating. Aaron, with all the latest lines out of the White House. Thank you for that. Now let's jump to CBS News Congressional reporter Taurean Small. He joins us from Capitol Hill. Taurean, good morning. Typically, Congress has a role in waging war. So how are lawmakers reacting to all of this, considering they were not included?
Yeah, good morning, Errol. Lawmakers are expectantly split on this one. We saw Republicans immediately come to the defense of the Trump administration. Senator Mike Lee of Utah, for example, saying that this falls under the inherent authority of the president, while Democrats are saying that this is the president showing again a step outside his power and circumventing Congress in order to forego or to go forward with his agenda. This is what both sides had to say yesterday during the Sunday show circuit.
We've got to make sure that the people who are now in charge of the apparatus of the Venezuelan government are not going to continue Nicolás Maduro's ways.
Look, Maduro's a horrible, horrible person. But you don't treat lawlessness with other lawlessness. This is reckless, and the American people are just, this morning, in fear of what's going to happen here. As I said, we pay the price. We pay the price in terms of treasure and in terms of blood.
Errol, there is a partisan divide clearly in the response to this. There has been some positive reactions from Democrats. Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz coming out saying that this was a necessary change that happened, and she praised the president for his action on this.
All right, Taurean Small on Capitol Hill. Thank you. Let's check the international reaction now. CBS News foreign correspondent Ramy Inocencio is standing by in our London bureau with that. Good morning, Ramy. We know that Russia and Venezuela have long had close ties, but the president said on Saturday he and Putin had not discussed Maduro. Let's just quickly play that for our viewers.
You had a phone call with him on Monday. Did he talk at all about Maduro? Did y'all talk about this?
No, we didn't. We never spoke about Maduro.
Are you mad at him right now? I mean, there's this intelligence.
I'm not thrilled with Putin. I'm not thrilled with Putin. He's killing too many people.
Help us understand that, Ramy, as well as Russia's relationship with Venezuela, in addition to China and Iran, especially when it comes to oil.
Absolutely, yes. Well, from all those countries, Errol, condemnation coming down on the United States, these strategic adversaries, all of them saying that this is a violation of Venezuela's sovereignty. First to China. Notably, Beijing buys most of Venezuela's oil, and it said that it was deeply shocked and that the U.S. clearly violated international law. But there's also rising concern that President Xi Jinping could actually now use Trump's military actions to finally invade Taiwan, the democratic island of Taiwan, just off the coast, as he has been saying. That is not off the table. Meanwhile, from Moscow, former President Dmitry Medvedev said that Trump's actions were illegal there. But he portrayed this as Trump defending America's national interest, because Venezuela, as we know, has the world's largest proven oil reserves. But Errol, critics are out there, and they're pointing to Moscow's own invasion, right? Ukraine's Donbass, resource-rich, coming to its fourth year in the invasion this March. And then you asked about Tehran, hit by mass protests against the regime again this week. 9 days so far in, Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei said that they won't yield to the enemy. And that's after Trump last week said that the U.S. is locked and loaded. That's a quote. If protesters were killed, he stressed that again on Air Force One overnight. And we're looking ahead to your morning. Venezuela has called for an emergency UN Security Council meeting that is expected at 10 a.m. New York time.
And so, Ramy, what about Washington's traditional allies? What has the reaction been from them?
Sure. Here in Europe, definitely more nuanced, a bit of a tightrope here. Bottom line is that they're questioning and criticizing the methods, the military methods that Washington used to extract Maduro, and then centering on whether they were legal, but they're not criticizing the final result of ousting Maduro, because no country in the European Union really ever recognized him after 2018, since Venezuela's presidential election then, described as free, not fair, let alone in 2024 there. So here in the UK, Prime Minister Starmer said he's not shedding any tears, and French President Emmanuel Macron and the German Chancellor are already looking ahead to some kind of transition to another government.
All right, Ramy Inocencio in London. Ramy, thank you. Now, when he is arraigned later today, Nicolás Maduro will face charges alleging that he used his position as president of Venezuela to take part in a scheme to traffic thousands of tons of cocaine into the United States. 60 Minutes correspondent Scott Pelley spoke to a former DEA agent who was involved in the investigation into Maduro about this case.
It's a state-sponsored drug trafficking organization, so it's a massive conspiracy. And what I mean by that is not everybody is going to be holding the kilos of cocaine. But in a conspiracy, you link everybody together that's part of the chain. Maduro was part of that chain, first as a minister of foreign affairs and then later as a president. So when you're the president of a country and you are giving the green light to engage in this activity, and you're putting people in critical positions, in governors, ministers, heads of agencies, and allowing them to carry out these drug trafficking activities, you're just as guilty as the person making the drugs and transporting the drugs.
Now, for more on the legal proceedings, we're joined by CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman. You see her there outside the federal courthouse here in New York City. This is where Maduro will be arraigned in a matter of hours. Good morning, Katrina. So help us understand what we will all witness today.
Good morning, Errol. So this is an arraignment. These are generally very short proceedings. Maduro and his wife will be informed of the charges against them. They'll be asked for their plea. We likely anticipate that they will plead not guilty. Apologies for the noise down here. But aside from that, we expect there could be some discussion about Maduro's detention. He is currently at the Metropolitan Detention Center. The judge will likely say that they will be detained without bond. We can also expect some discussion from the prosecution about the evidence they have against Maduro, what motions the defense plans to file. But Errol, a real threshold question here is we don't yet know who Maduro is using as his legal representation, or whether whoever is there with him today will ultimately represent him in court. He may have some issues in terms of getting a private attorney because of sanctions against him by the United States.
And Katrina, how challenging will this be for a U.S. jurisdiction to prosecute a foreign leader? What are the challenges here?
Well, Errol, we have successfully prosecuted foreign leaders. That includes General Noriega of Panama and the former president of Hernandez, who was recently pardoned by President Trump. But there will be challenges here and issues that have been raised in those proceedings. For example, whether or not there is head of state immunity. We very likely expect that Maduro will argue that. Noriega did unsuccessfully, although there are some differences in how they have both been acknowledged as the leaders of their country. So that is very, very likely something that we will see here. Also, whether or not he can be prosecuted for his official acts. Now, that is from the Supreme Court decision, Trump versus United States, that said that Trump could not be prosecuted for his official acts. So likely another issue that we'll see here. Then there's evidence. There's likely classified information, which always creates complications for cases, Errol, and the fact that there are witnesses in another country, Venezuela, very likely the government will want to use. So many challenges here, but also the U.S. has been successful in other prosecutions against foreign heads of state.
All right, such a busy day where you are. We expect, Katrina, thank you very much.